next.
I am Dr. Jeffrey Zacko-Smith, the newest member of the faculty at the International Center for Studies in Creativity. I'm Assistant Professor and Leadership Minor Coordinator. And I'm going to be talking today about leadership theory and practice, particularly focusing on some emerging trends in the field. So a little context goes a long way. I'm a big believer in providing context. Everything really only makes sense to us in context. Because theory and practice inform each other, today's conversation is going to include both. And at the International Center for Studies in Creativity, we feel that everyone is creative and that everything is the product of creative thought. And we actually view leadership the same way. It's expressed in many ways, and everyone is capable of exercising it. And my goal here today is to just briefly present some current thinking on the subject and finish up with a few suggestions for your own leadership practice. So I'm going to be talking about two cutting-edge and very related topics. The first being transcendent leadership. Albert Einstein once said that a problem could never be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. A new leadership frame, transcendent leadership, has emerged over the past several years. David Bohm, Robert K. Greenleaf, who many of you may know or recognize as affiliated with servant leadership, and Mohandas K. Gandhi, among others, inspired the formation of this new metaphor of leadership. And actually, Diane Larkin, back in 1995 at Seattle University, my graduate alma mater, was the first to coin the phrase transcendent leadership to describe a special leadership that she observed among leaders who transcend self into compassionate being and action. Related to this is authentic leadership, which is my current area of research interest. It can be said that contemporary leadership research has not kept pace with our understandings of authenticity. What does it mean to be living authentically? Leading to a stunted view of what it means to truly be in this world, and also to lead in this world. Aptly described by T.S. Eliot in The Hollow Man, one of my favorite Eliot poems, this disconnect between true personal authenticity and action creates a damaging void. We are the hollow men, we are the stuffed men, leaning together, headpiece filled with straw. Alas, our dried voices, when we whisper together, are quiet and meaningless, as the wind in dry grass or rats' feet over broken glass in our dry cellar. So transcendent leadership is part of the 3 T's or leadership triad, this being transactional leadership, transformational leadership, and, of course, the 3rd T, transcendent leadership. Transactional leadership, of course, is old school leadership theory, old school leadership thinking, coming from this mentality of it all being about the transaction. Leader and constituents aren't necessarily concerned with one another, but they have a very production-oriented, efficiency-oriented mindset. Transformational leadership, which gained popularity in the 70s into the 80s when sort of the self-help movement came around, sort of bumps this up a notch and really starts to focus more on the leader and follower in relationship. Transcendent leadership actually bumps this up yet another notch, and it not only looks at the relationship between the leader and follower, but looks on the effect of that relationship on the rest of the world. So this triad, the 3 T's, is useful in understanding leadership because it concisely showcases leadership's past, present, and future. Transcendent leadership is seen as an emerging leadership theory, especially useful in a diverse and globalized society. For our purposes today, transcendent leadership asks that we transcend self, in other words, transcend transactional leadership, transcend other, go beyond transformational leadership, and begin leading from a consciousness of wholeness instead. This has been modeled historically by leaders such as Gandhi, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King Jr. Transcendent leadership involves viewing yourself as the whole of mankind. So it's a shift in viewpoint, it's a change in metaphor or lens. Under this worldview, the leader is reflective, value-centered, global in perspective, and a facilitator of dialogue. Lillian Smith, author, activist, and social critic, said, "I soon realized that no journey carries one far unless, as it extends into the world around us, it goes an equal distance into the world within." Authentic leadership in perspective. So authentic leadership is related to transcendent leadership in that it is also centered in wholeness. the kind that results from a deeper exploration of selfhood. It heeds the call to know thyself, or in Latin, nocete ipsum, referring to the ideal of understanding human behavior, morals, and thought, because ultimately, to understand oneself is to understand others as well. Traditional definitions of what it means to lead authentically have centered on matching actions to words. In other words, walking your talk. It's similar to what Kouzes and Posner would call modeling the way, which is one of their 5 exemplary leadership practices that they outline in their very popular book, The Leadership Challenge. However, I feel that leading in a postmodern age, where life can only be described as hyper-diverse, requires the deeper leadership practice only found in making a commitment to doing inner work and developing self-knowledge. It should be noted that this is a process and not a destination. So authentic leadership is the character trait or virtue of authenticity. It's that of being genuine, honest with oneself as well as others. Authenticity connotes not only candor, but an absence of hypocrisy or self-deception. Authentic leadership is not a matter of gaining an objective perspective on a situation and then applying some theory to it. It comes from within, from the ground up, and is dictated by context. It's more than basic self-awareness. Many leadership researchers and writers have been acknowledging that we have moved beyond transformational models and thus well beyond the simplicity that transactional leadership allows, indicating that instead we're seeking more transcendent leadership forms that allow us to move far beyond a limited concern primarily for self and other. The entire modern agenda, which insists on locating all problems and solutions out there somewhere, solutions that often involve violent change in external arrangements, is rooted in our failure to come to terms with what is in here and between us. In essence, follow your passion to its end. It's my belief that far too many of us misconstrue this call to be true to ourselves, associating such efforts with inner work that is simply too shallow and superficial to allow fully authentic leadership to emerge. This tendency to stop short, in turn, interferes with our level of self-knowledge, which, in turn, negatively impacts our ability to relate to others in an authentic way. Since leadership is, to a large extent, relational and social, it's about relationships, those relationships, that communication becomes limited and superficial. How can we expect to lead others in ways that are transcendent or authentic if we have not yet done the work necessary to get there ourselves? So, truly authentic leadership calls us to do several things. The first, that we ourselves do the inner work necessary so that we understand who we are and what has brought us to this point in our lives. It asks us to mentor and support the inner work of others and engage in open dialogue with them. It asks us to see all of humankind as a part of the web of life. All things are connected. It asks us to actively reflect and commit to lifelong learning and provide leadership education programs that ensure self-development. Conclusion, as leaders, we must be prepared for the fact that we're now progressing yet again to a society of creators and empathizers, of pattern recognizers and meaning makers.